She didn't say it like someone afraid. She didn't whisper it like a woman who needed help or comfort or was overwhelmed. No, she said it like a decision, like a line she had rehearsed and finally got to deliver, right in that tiny moment of silence between the minister's cue and the final run-through of our vows. "I can't do this," she said, standing 2 feet in front of me, her veil already pinned, bouquet in hand, her family seated in the front pews of the church laughing with mine. I remember the smell of those lilies, the warm weight of the suit on my back, the scratchy collar I'd spent hours adjusting just right. And then just like that, her voice punctured the ceremony like a slow-moving knife. And for a second, I didn't move. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even blink. I just looked at her, as her eyes scanned the room like she was already halfway out the door. She took a single step back, and her bouquet dropped a half-inch in her hands, like the weight of it suddenly became too much to hold. And in the stillness that followed, with the faint sound of my mother's laughter still echoing from the other side of the chapel, her colleague took a slow step toward me, slid her arm through mine, and whispered, clear enough that only I could hear, "But I can." Everything that came before that moment suddenly collapsed into silence. And I don't mean dramatic silence. I mean real, soul-collapsing, mind-erasing silence where nothing makes sense and everything around you becomes a blur of color and heat and shapes without form. Because up until that second, I was going to marry her. I was going to give her everything. And she didn't just walk away, she orchestrated it. She waited until it meant something, until the humiliation would be permanent, until it would stain the memories of everyone in that room. That wasn't hesitation. That was betrayal. Designed. Sharp. Surgical. I remember looking at the colleague, Elise, like I was seeing her for the first time. She had always been around, always polite, quiet, never once hinted at anything deeper. And yet in that second, when the woman I thought I would grow old with stepped away like she was discarding an outfit that no longer fit, Elise stepped forward like she had always known this moment would come. Her grip on my arm wasn't soft. It was grounded, solid, like someone saying, "You're not alone, and I won't let you fall, even if I should." I didn't say a word. I let her hold me there, in front of everyone, as my bride-to-be walked down the aisle, alone, out the back, and didn't look back. People say time slows down in traumatic moments. But it doesn't. It fractures. It turns to glass and breaks into pieces you can't pick up fast enough. I remember my best friend slowly rising from the second row, the confusion on his face caught somewhere between do I follow her and do I console him? My mother had this look like her entire reality had been upended and she was trying to keep it together for the guests. Her dad, well, he just looked disappointed. Not in me, in her. That told me more than I think he meant to show. Elise didn't speak again until we were outside, until the church emptied out, and we were standing by the fountain behind the old brick wall where the photographers had set up for post-ceremony shots that never happened. I asked her, finally, voice thick and stupid, "Did you know?" And she said, quietly, not looking at me, not needing to, "She's been planning it for weeks." I told her she needed to be honest with you, but she didn't want to hurt you. She laughed at her own words, not because they were funny, but because they were so far removed from the reality of what just happened that it became absurd. Not like this. This wasn't how I imagined it. I remember the way the light caught her hair, the way her jaw was set like someone who had just made peace with being the villain. Elise wasn't the kind of person to insert herself where she wasn't needed. So I knew, in that second, she'd stepped up not because she wanted to be some dramatic savior, but because she'd watched my fiancé play her game too long. And she hated it. Maybe not for me. Maybe just for the principle. But hated she did. And right then, I hated it too. Every lie. Every late meeting that went unexplained. Every time I made excuses for her coldness in the last month. Every time I caught her looking at me like I was a stranger she had somehow gotten stuck with. She never came back. Never called. Never explained. The next time I saw her name was on a shared Instagram story 3 weeks later from a city she, and I had once planned to honeymoon in. Only this time, she wasn't alone. She was with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, square-jawed, the kind of guy you don't bring home until you're ready to replace a memory. And Elise was right there beside me when I saw it, sitting on the couch, quietly handing me her phone like she already knew. "Check her tagged photos," she said. And I did. And I wish I hadn't. Because the date on one of them? A week before the rehearsal. That was the moment I realized this wasn't hesitation. This wasn't a crisis of commitment. This was a setup. A slow fade. A cold transition. She hadn't just changed her mind. She had found a replacement. And rather than break it off with dignity, she made me the fool. She chose spectacle over honesty. She chose cruelty dressed in white. And that was the last moment I let her have the upper hand. Because after that, something in me snapped. Not the loud kind of snap. Not rage. But the quiet kind. The focused kind. The kind that turns humiliation into fuel. And Elise, God help her, had seen that same look before. She just nodded once, handed me back the phone, and said, "So what now?" What came next wasn't some wild declaration or furious breakdown. It was silence. A silence that carried with it a weight, thick and suffocating, not just of betrayal, but of clarity. I stopped drinking the coffee Elise had made. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't even respond when my phone buzzed with messages from friends trying to make sense of what happened. Because I wasn't ready to share it. Not yet. Not until I understood the scale of the lie. Not until I pulled the whole thing apart. I started with the obvious. I went back through messages, emails, call logs. Every dinner rescheduled at the last minute. Every work trip extended by a day. I created a timeline, not for some dramatic reason, but because I needed to see it. I needed the full picture. I needed to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. And slowly, piece by piece, the puzzle came together. The dates overlapped. The excuses matched too perfectly. I found emails between her and her new guy. Yes, she'd used her work account, like it was all just another part of her life she never expected to be questioned. I didn't feel anger then. I felt insulted. Like she assumed I was too stupid or too naive to notice. Like she believed that by the time I figured it out, I'd be so crushed I wouldn't have the strength to push back. And for a time, she was almost right. But the difference between heartbreak and humiliation is important. Heartbreak makes you cry. Humiliation makes you plan. The moment I broke wasn't when I found the first message. It was when I remembered the hotel room. 2 weeks before the wedding, she'd told me she needed space. She said she was going to a spa weekend with Elise. Actually, Elise, who had looked me in the eye and quietly shook her head when I asked if she had gone. She wasn't even trying to make it believable anymore. She was just phasing me out. That's when I knew this wasn't about closure. This wasn't about moving on. This was about making sure she never did it to anyone else again. This was about making her answer for every smug, whispered conversation, every stolen glance across the office, every lie that turned me into a prop in her performance of innocence. So no, I didn't fall apart. I didn't send the angry text. I didn't block her on social media. I took notes. I made backups. I took screenshots. I found names. And slowly, the shape of a plan began to form. Because if she was going to use our wedding to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved, I was going to use that same spotlight to show everyone who she really was. But I wasn't going to scream it. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum. I was going to be careful, patient, precise. Because revenge isn't rage. Revenge is remembering. The first rule I gave myself was simple: no impulsive moves. I wouldn't confront her, wouldn't post anything, wouldn't alert anyone to the fact that I was even thinking about payback. Because she needed to believe she got away with it. That was the only way it would work. Because if you want to take someone like her down, you don't swing. You watch. You wait. And you strike when it does the most damage to her image, not just her feelings. I started by gathering. Not just the messages, but context. Patterns. I reached out to a few people, not close friends, not anyone she would suspect. One of her old co-workers, a guy I knew she had a complicated history with. A bartender from the place she used to host client events. A woman from her gym who once came up to me and said something cryptic about how strong I was for dealing with all that. At the time, I brushed it off. Now, I was listening. The stories came fast and quiet. One by one, the pieces clicked. No one had said anything before because they didn't want to interfere or they assumed I knew. But when I pressed, when I gave them room, they opened up. Elise helped too. She gave me her own observations. She knew more than I expected, but she had kept her mouth shut because she believed people deserved to make their own choices. Now, she was done staying quiet. We found a pattern. It wasn't just this new guy. It had been a string. Small, emotionally distant affairs, little power plays at work, strategic dating to move up socially and professionally. I found a calendar entry she hadn't deleted. A dinner reservation under a fake name. The details didn't make me angrier. They made me sharper. I stopped looking at her like someone I loved and started seeing her as a project. A problem to solve. A story to end. My plan started simple: gather the facts. Organize them. Build a story she couldn't deny, couldn't twist. Then, deliver it at the exact moment when she was most exposed. I found out through a mutual contact that she was preparing to speak at a regional business conference. Nothing massive, but it was a big deal to her. A networking moment. A status move. She had even posted a teaser on LinkedIn. Big things coming. Can't wait to share the stage with some of the best minds in the industry. Perfect. So I waited. I refined the details. Elise helped me organize everything. We put together a folder, a neat, professional, almost clinical dossier of who she really was. Screenshots, dates, statements, even a quietly recorded voice memo where she joked, laughing, about how I probably wouldn't even notice if she disappeared. Elise had it from a group dinner weeks before the wedding. I almost didn't listen to it. But I did. Twice. And then I saved it. But I didn't want to destroy her career. That wasn't the point. I wanted the mask to fall. I wanted her circle to know. I wanted her curated image to crack just enough that it never fit back together the same way again. A week before the event, I sent an anonymous package to her new boyfriend. Photos. A copy of the timeline. No words. Just evidence. I don't know what happened between them after that, but I saw that he unfollowed her the same day. That same night, she posted a vague story about loyalty being so rare these days. It made me smile. Then I prepped the final piece, the reveal. I knew people would be live posting from the event. She always encouraged her team to tag her. So, anonymously, from a throwaway account, I uploaded the dossier. Attached to it was a single line. Here is the woman you're about to hear speak about leadership, ethics, and trust. I timed it to drop 10 minutes before her talk. And then I waited. I didn't even need to be in the room. That was the beauty of it. I didn't want to be there, actually. I didn't want to see her try to spin it. Didn't want to hear her stammer out some half-truth masked as self-awareness. I didn't need to see her fall apart in real time. What I wanted was for her to feel it. Slowly. In waves. For every smile she flashed when she walked on stage to start crumbling when she saw faces drop in the crowd. I wanted her to see eyes looking down at phones, then back up at her. I wanted the shift in body language, the muttering, the awkward fidgeting from her co-speakers. I wanted the slow realization that something had changed, and she couldn't control it. Elise and I watched it unfold from a distance. She had a friend in the audience who sent us updates, blow by blow. First, a pause in her opening speech. Then a sudden pivot, trying to adjust the topic. Then her voice tightening, speeding up. She rushed the second half of the presentation, skipped the Q&A completely, walked off stage stiffly, eyes forward like she couldn't wait to be alone. The room didn't clap long, not the way she was used to. 15 minutes later, her LinkedIn post was deleted. Comments from attendees started popping up on the event hashtag. Vague mentions of disappointment, of someone not being what they appeared to be. Someone even posted a screen grab of the dossier. It started making rounds. Quietly, no explosion, just steady erosion. That night, I got the first message. Not from her. From one of her old colleagues, someone I barely remembered, but who had always struck me as too polite to be real. The message was simple: saw what happened. About time someone did something. Then another, and another. People who'd been burned by her. People she manipulated, talked over, sabotaged to get ahead. People who had stories, but no proof, until now. The document we uploaded wasn't just revenge. It became confirmation. A thread others could pull. She didn't call. She texted 2 days later. Just a single line. "Why would you do this to me?" And I stared at it, that message blinking back at me like it had any power left. Elise leaned over and read it too. She didn't say anything for a moment, then asked me what I was going to do. I didn't reply to her. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to sit in that silence, to know that it wasn't a mistake, that I wasn't lashing out, that this was deliberate, and that there was no coming back from it. A week later, she took her social media profiles private. The new boyfriend was gone. Her conference speaking engagements vanished from her bios. She didn't show up to her company's quarterly meeting. A new face had taken over her client portfolio, and slowly, quietly, her online presence shrank to nothing. No updates, no vacation photos, no engagement announcements. She faded. And me? I didn't go viral. I didn't brag. I went back to work. I went to therapy. Elise and I started seeing more of each other, slowly, cautiously. She never overstepped. She never acted like she deserved anything. But she stayed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. The revenge wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was measured, clinical, permanent. It was enough. In the weeks after it all came undone, there was no parade. No grand moment of justice broadcast for the world to celebrate. The world moved on, as it always does, and the woman who once curated her life like a highlight reel simply vanished from it. That was the quiet truth of the whole thing. Revenge didn't bring closure, but it did bring peace. Not the kind that wraps everything in a bow, but the kind that allows you to sit in silence without your mind spinning like a broken projector. I remember the first morning I woke up without thinking of her. No rage, no regret, no mental script of what I should have said or done. Just a simple, uninterrupted breath. That, more than anything, was the real consequence. Not the fallout on her end, not the shifting glances she probably got from her colleagues, not even the retreat from social media. It was the reclaiming of space in my own head. Elise had become a quiet constant. Not a replacement, not a savior, just someone who understood. There were mornings we didn't speak for the first hour. She'd make coffee, I'd answer a few emails. But it wasn't empty. It was calm. And over time, calm turned into something gentler, a sort of trust one never thought I'd feel again. Not because she tried to prove anything, but because she never tried to fix me. The messages from people she'd hurt kept coming. Not floods, but little ripples. Men and women who had similar stories. Micro-betrayals. Subtle manipulation. People she used to climb higher. Some of them just wanted to be heard. Others wanted to know how I did it. How I pulled it off without burning myself in the process. And the truth was, I didn't come out untouched. I had scars. Invisible ones. You can't invest your whole self into someone and walk away clean. The aftermath wasn't a movie montage. I didn't suddenly get promoted or move to a beach town and write a book about self-discovery. I just lived. Bit by bit, the little things came back. Appetite, sleep, music. I stopped analyzing every lyric for hidden meanings. I stopped comparing every new conversation to the one that came before. And I forgave myself. Not her, never her, but me. For ignoring the signs. For staying too long. For believing that love was supposed to hurt if it was real. I saw her once. About 6 months later. Random. A bookstore of all places. She didn't notice me at first. She was thinner. Tired. Not worn out in the way you get from hard work, but in the way you get from always looking over your shoulder. I watched her for a moment, then turned and left. She didn't chase. Didn't text. I think she knew. And maybe that was the final act of it all. Not confrontation. Not vindication, but walking away without needing to prove anything, without the need for the last word. Because when you really win, when you've really moved on, the silence is loud enough on its own.